Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. Austin, Nevada, was a small mining town in the arid hills of the West. Wooden houses and commercial buildings occupied the valley, driven by the silver mining that brought life to the area. The discovery of silver in the Reese River in 1862 attracted miners seeking wealth. The mines were so promising that, for a brief period, Austin became one of the most relevant towns for mining in Nevada. In the photo, we see a street in Fort Worth with wagons and horses in front of stores and saloons. Originally founded as a military post, the city had about 6,000 inhabitants by around 1880. An area known as Hell's Half Acre was a hotspot of chaos, with saloons and brothels scattered everywhere. Violence was frequent, with gunfights and disputes between cowboys and criminals, making the area famous for its disorder. Here we see Harrison Avenue in Guthrie, with a bazaar announcing promotions on items like boots, shoes, hats, and rugs. The avenue was the commercial heart of the town, offering a wide variety of products for locals and travelers. Guthrie had a telegraph network that connected the town to other areas, facilitating trade and communication during a period of rapid growth in Oklahoma. A panoramic view of the city of El Paso in 1880, with simple homes and dirt streets still under development. It was in some of these buildings that the famous Billy the Kid hid after a series of confrontations in New Mexico. El Paso at the time was known for its high crime rate, with many outlaws hiding in the city, mainly due to its proximity to the Mexican border. Situated on a dry hillside, Cerro Gordo became one of California's largest silver producers, sending tons of the metal to Los Angeles at the height of mining. The town was known as a ruthless place where disputes and rivalries were settled with revolvers. Confrontations between miners and outlaws interested in silver shipments were common, creating a tense atmosphere and constant vigilance among residents. Main Street in Calico, California, before the devastating fire of 1883. The town, which thrived on silver mining, was struck by a catastrophic fire that destroyed almost all of its buildings, leaving only a few stone structures standing. The fire started in a wooden warehouse and spread quickly. The tragedy marked the end of Calico's gold rush era, which never fully recovered from the destruction. Main Street in Deadwood, South Dakota, was a busy street, filled with stores, saloons, and banks that served the growing population. The town, born out of the gold rush, surprised with its infrastructure, including gas-lit streets, elevated sidewalks to avoid mud, and makeshift drainage systems. Deadwood also attracted historical figures like Wild Bill Hickok, who was murdered in the Nuttall and Mann's saloon. Chestnut Street in Leadville, Colorado, was one of the main streets in the town, with stores, offices, and bookstores. The wooden sidewalks were crowded with locals and travelers, while horses and wagons crossed the street carrying goods. Leadville made history with events such as the duel between Doc Holliday and Billy Allen, which took place on a nearby street, bringing notoriety to the town during the Wild West times. Here we see Cornucopia, Oregon, in 1884, with mules and wagons in the streets. Surrounded by tall pine trees, the town thrived on gold extraction from the mountains. At its peak, Cornucopia generated more than $10 million in gold, attracting adventurers from all over. The town had more saloons than any other type of establishment, famous for its lively nights where miners spent their fortunes on drinks and gambling. Hays, Kansas, was a town that went from being a dangerous haven for outlaws to a vital center of commerce and transport. By 1885, its streets already housed wooden houses, commercial buildings, and a growing population. The town gained fame in the past for frequent conflicts and the presence of notable figures such as Buffalo Bill, who used Hays as a base while working in the region. Here, we see the busy Wells, Fargo & Co.'s express office in Carson City in the 1870s. This company was responsible for transporting gold, letters, and goods, connecting Carson City to the rest of the country. Next door was the Ormsby House, a well-known hotel where travelers rested and stagecoaches made stops. Wells Fargo also hired armed guards to protect the gold, as bandit attacks were common on the roads. The Waldo store in the town of Waldo, Oregon, was more than just a store. This establishment functioned as a general store, post office, and even as a supply depot for the area's mines. The store coordinated the shipment of food, tools, and even medicines directly to the miners' camps. Pine Street in Abilene, Texas, was one of the busiest places in the region. The main street, filled with saloons and stores, attracted cowboys and passing travelers. With cattle drives and the arrival of railroads, Abilene grew quickly, becoming an important commercial center. The city was one of the first to hire police officers to control the frequent fights in saloons, which were common due to the large number of cowboys passing through. In Langtry, Texas, Judge Roy Bean's courthouse stood out as an unusual location. More than a courtroom, it was also a bar, with the judge himself acting as bartender. Known as the law west of the Pecos, Bean made rulings that defied legal norms based on his own interpretation of justice. Anyone entering never knew if they would be judged or served a drink. The pharmacy in Dodge City, Kansas, was one of the few places where locals sought relief for everyday ailments. In addition to conventional medicine, it sold elixirs, promising miraculous cures for everything from joint pain to respiratory problems. The pharmacist also served as a dentist, performing extractions and basic treatments, as specialists were rare in the region. With its large wooden structure and imposing facade, the Merchants Hotel in Wahpeton, North Dakota, was a key stop for merchants and travelers. It offered accommodations, meals, and spaces for meetings. Located near the train station, it was strategic for business. At its peak, it hosted more than 100 people at once and served as a venue for dances and local council meetings. In front of the American Exchange Hotel in Sutter Creek, California, a stagecoach is ready to depart, carrying passengers and goods. The hotel was a mandatory stop, providing lodging and meals to travelers before they faced the rough roads ahead. The stagecoach transported both people and valuable parcels, and the hotel employed armed guards to protect gold shipments and other precious items. In this photo from 1875, we see Congress Avenue in Austin, with the Capitol building in the background. With the arrival of the railroad 4 years earlier, the city developed quickly. The avenue gained one of the first public transport lines with horse-drawn cars, making it easier for Austin's growing population to connect with the more distant areas of the city. In Haley, Idaho, in 1884, the pharmacy sold unusual items today, like paints, oils, and glass, used for property maintenance, such as painting houses and repairing broken windows. Next door, the Nevada Chop House served as a meeting place for the community, where miners exchanged information about the mines and farmers discussed business. In this photo from 1860, we see the International Hotel on C Street in Virginia City. With 3 floors, the hotel hosted travelers, miners, and investors attracted by the Comstock Lode Silver Rush. In addition to simple, comfortable rooms, it was one of the first buildings in the West to have steam-powered elevators, which caught the attention and impressed guests at the time. Bismarck, North Dakota, was a strategic town in the Wild West, used as a base for expeditions to the mines and native lands. With the arrival of the railroad, it became an important center for cattle and goods transport. At its peak, bounty hunters stopped in town while pursuing outlaws in the region. The blacksmith shop in Burlington, North Dakota, gathered workers and travelers with wagons and horses. More than fixing tools and horseshoes, the place was essential for crafting custom parts, such as wagon parts and blades used in rural work. The blacksmiths also produced custom horseshoes for racehorses, meeting the growing demand for organized competitions in the western towns. In Oklahoma, a man stands in front of a furniture store transporting tables and chairs. At that time, wagons were the main means of transporting goods for new settlers seeking a life in the West. The photo was taken during the land rush in 1889, when over 50,000 people arrived in the territory seeking the free land offered by the government. Cowlitz Avenue in Castle Rock, Washington, circa 1897, shows a quiet street with establishments like a bakery and a furniture store. Castle Rock was crucial in regional expansion, serving as a stop for stagecoaches and merchants traveling between Portland and Seattle. Despite the calm appearance in the photo, the avenue was a busy route for supplies and mail connecting settlements along the way. In this bar, photographed in 1889 in California, customers sit in chairs made from bear skins, a creation by bartender Seth Kinman, a famous hunter. Kinman claimed to have killed 800 grizzly bears in his lifetime. Sitting in these chairs is like becoming part of a story, each one carrying the memory of a hunt. They are a symbol of a time when the American frontier was still wild and full of dangers. In Juneau, Alaska, in the 1890s, the town expanded along the coast, with warehouses and houses close to the dock. The growth was driven by gold mining, which attracted many residents. During this time, Juneau also became a stopover point for outlaws, like the famous bandit Frank "Billy" Stiles. His name was forever marked in stories of robberies and escapes through the Alaskan mountains. The first blacksmith shop in Guthrie, Oklahoma in 1889 was set up simply in the middle of a field with makeshift equipment and a tent. At the time, Guthrie was a newly formed town, and blacksmiths were crucial to meet the needs of the pioneers. Guthrie quickly became a development hub, becoming the first state capital of Oklahoma after its establishment. The Gould and Curry smelter in Virginia City, Nevada, processed ore extracted from the Comstock lode, one of the largest silver discoveries in U.S. history. Transforming the ore into refined silver, the smelter drove the city's rapid growth, which, due to the wealth it generated, attracted miners and entrepreneurs, becoming one of the largest mining and trading centers in the West. In Acoma, New Mexico in 1886, life in the town developed with residents working on adobe constructions, using ladders to reach the roofs. The houses were made of clay and bricks, adapted to the arid climate. Located atop a mesa, Acoma offered a strategic position for defense. During the Wild West period, it was an important community for native peoples who resisted the invasion of settlers and soldiers. Chinese merchants posed in front of the Hop Wo Chong and Company dry goods store in Arizona in 1894. The Chinese played a significant role in the Wild West, especially after their mass arrival during the construction of railroads. Many of them settled as merchants, and despite facing discrimination and legal challenges, they formed strong communities and established prosperous businesses. The settlement of Anadarko in the Oklahoma Territory was forming, with tents serving as housing and temporary shops. Founded during the expansion period, the town attracted settlers seeking new opportunities. Towns like Anadarko frequently received outsiders and itinerant traders, including cowboys driving cattle, making the place a typical Wild West stopover. The Sherman Station in Albany County, Wyoming, was a small railroad stop along the newly constructed Transcontinental Railroad. The station facilitated the transport of goods and passengers, connecting isolated communities to the rest of the country. Traveling by train in the Wild West was not a pleasant experience. Trips were long and uncomfortable, with open windows letting in soot and dust, but it offered a faster alternative to wagon travel. Gold Hill, in Nevada, was a bustling mining town near the famous Comstock lode, the largest silver discovery in the U.S. The town grew rapidly due to mining, housing miners, merchants, and engineers involved in operations. The Gold Hill mines used advanced systems for the time, such as steam-powered machines to pump water from deep mines, allowing larger-scale extraction and attracting investors from across the country. The officers' quarters at Fort Rawlins, Wyoming, show how difficult life was for soldiers in remote outposts. Made of wood and canvas, these barracks provided only the basics. The fort had an important role, protecting transportation routes and settlers crossing the region. It was also a support point for caravans and soldiers who faced constant tension with local native tribes. Men gather in front of a blacksmith shop in Colorado in 1895. The blacksmith shop was the heart of the town's hard work, where everything from horseshoes to tools used by farmers and miners was forged. In the West, it was impossible to live without these shops, especially in a region like Colorado, where mining and cattle ranching depended on durable equipment. Here we see the hotel and general store in Wilton, North Dakota in the 1890s. The hotel received travelers and merchants coming by railroad, while the store provided tools, food, and ammunition to the community. It also served as a base for sheriffs and deputies to organize patrols against cattle rustlers, a frequent concern in the area at the time. The square in Honey Grove, Texas, was crowded in 1885. The town, called the Queen of Texas Towns, was famous for its cotton trade, which attracted people from all over. The title came from its well-organized infrastructure for the time, with schools, churches, and active commerce, setting it apart from neighboring towns. Honey Grove got its name from pioneer Davy Crockett, who, while camping in the area, was impressed by the abundance of honey in the trees. Valley Avenue in Baker City, Oregon was one of the busiest streets in 1875. The Jet Brothers Bakery attracted locals and travelers with fresh bread, while the nearby tobacco shop offered cigars and pipes, essential items for the men of the time. Bounty hunters also passed through Valley Avenue in search of outlaws, as Baker City served as a point of passage for several escape routes in the West. Douglas Avenue in Wichita was the heart of the city's life. In the photo, we see a restaurant, a clothing store, and at the center, the famous Fritz Schnitzler's saloon, with Schnitzler's portrait above the porch. More than a bar, the saloon attracted gamblers with poker rounds and pool competitions that went until dawn. On auction days, the avenue was full of wagons and people negotiating horses, land, and other goods. The French Hotel in San Luis Obispo, California, around 1873, was a two-story wooden hotel ideal for tired travelers. It offered simple, comfortable rooms with iron beds and cotton sheets. On the ground floor, a saloon hosted guests for meals and drinks. The hotel also had a hidden safe in the basement, where miners passing through could securely store their gold during their stay. Here we see Panamint City, California, in 1875, a town that sprung up after silver was discovered in the surrounding mountains. Like many other towns in the Wild West, the city grew rapidly due to mining, but its life was short-lived. At its peak, Panamint City had more than 1,000 residents, but as the mines ran dry, the population dwindled and the town was abandoned, becoming another of the Wild West's ghost towns. The Amarillo Hotel was located in the center of town, near the railroad station. Built between 1887 and 1888, it had 2 floors, a wooden facade, and a porch in the front. Initially, the town of Amarillo was just a train stop, but it soon grew with the arrival of merchants and travelers. The hotel played an important role in the town's expansion, being one of the first places where ranchers traded land and cattle. The main street of the Tonopah settlement in Nevada was always bustling. In the photo, we see covered wagons bringing goods to local stores, essential for the economy and daily life of the residents. The town has a historical connection with Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch, who used Tonopah as a hideout, taking advantage of the circulation of miners and merchants to blend in while planning their robberies. Grand Island, Nebraska, in 1867, was a small settlement in formation, with simple buildings spread across the land. In the center of the photo, the small saloon was the busiest place in town. In the background, a church served as a school and meeting place to resolve community disputes. Colonized by Germans from Russia, the town brought European traditions that contributed to its local growth. Drover's Cottage in Ellsworth, Kansas was one of the largest hotels in the region, designed to cater to cowboys, merchants, and travelers crossing the busy town. With 3 stories and an imposing structure for the time, it offered simple but comfortable rooms, as well as a dining hall on the ground floor for meals and meetings. Ellsworth, a strategic point in cattle transport, made the hotel a crucial stop for cowboys driving herds by rail. Here we see the mercantile stores of J.A. Emmons and the drug store in Santa Fe, New Mexico territory. The liquor store and pharmacy offered essential products that were hard to find in remote areas. Although Santa Fe was a trade center, the city was still small and isolated until the end of the 19th century. With few paved roads and limited access to other parts of the country, local commerce was vital for the residents. In the photo, we see the Lillard and McDonald store in Broken Bow, Nebraska, around 1886. Specializing in agricultural equipment, firearms, and ammunition, the store offered items like the Acme pulverizing harrow plows, known for their efficiency in preparing the soil for planting. In addition to meeting practical needs, it was also a meeting place for locals who bought ammunition for hunting and personal defense. At the White Dog Saloon in 1898, 3 men are inside the bar, one of them holding a gun, as was common at the time, since many saloons were places of tension and disputes. Armed men frequented these establishments where territorial or honor disputes could end in fights and shootouts. The saloon environment was marked by violence, and even a simple conversation could quickly escalate into an armed confrontation. The Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City, Kansas, had an imposing interior. with a light wood-carved bar that stood out in the room. Gas lamps softly illuminated the space, while the walls were adorned with simple but elegant artwork and decorations. In the background, tables hosted groups playing cards or chatting, while live music enlivened the place, making the Long Branch one of the most popular and lively saloons in town. In Benton, Wyoming territory, makeshift tents formed the commercial center, serving miners and merchants. The bank, liquor store, and china shop attracted those seeking riches in the area. With the city's rapid growth, the population surged to 3,000 people in just 3 months. This growth brought a bustling atmosphere with 25 saloons and 5 dance halls, where fights between miners and merchants were common. In the photo, we see a mule team in Index, Washington around 1911 leaving for the mines. Located between mountains, the town was strategic for supplying miners seeking gold and silver. These convoys carried supplies like food and dynamite, navigating difficult terrain. The mules, essential for transport, were as valuable as the ore and were carefully guarded, as without them, work in the mountains would be impossible. Lands in a new California territory were auctioned under a tent, with a large crowd waiting while the lots were contested. Men and women eagerly awaited the chance to secure a piece of land. These auctions were a common way to distribute land to new settlers, fueling the growth of communities. With the advance of railroads and new opportunities, events like this attracted those seeking a new life in the West. The construction of the water tower in Perry, Oklahoma in 1893 marked the arrival of running water in the town. Newly founded, Perry was solidifying itself as a frontier community. This advancement was crucial for local development, ensuring water supply for residents and attracting new settlers. Running water was also essential in combating disease outbreaks like cholera and typhoid fever, which were common in towns without access to treated water systems. The team from the Daily Reporter newspaper poses in front of their makeshift headquarters in Corinne, Utah in 1878. Newspapers like the Daily Reporter were the main means to keep communities informed about current events. Journalists in the Wild West often faced threats of violence for controversial reports, especially in towns where law and order were still The team from the Daily Reporter newspaper Women pose in front of the Klondike Dance Hall in Seattle, Washington in 1909. The venue, also a saloon, was famous for its dance nights, attracting adventurers and workers from the Alaskan Gold Rush. These women, often known as saloon dancers, worked to entertain events and attract customers, earning a percentage of the drinks sold. A small wooden jail in Wyoming territory in 1893 served to hold criminals in a period when the law was still being established. Jails like this were common in frontier towns, built from simple materials but effective for the temporary containment of prisoners. With fragile structures, escape attempts or rescues by accomplices were frequent, requiring constant vigilance from the few local deputies. In this photo from 1894, we see the English Kitchen restaurant in Oklahoma, which served meals for 20 cents. These restaurants were run by families and used fresh ingredients, often from local farms. At the time, 20 cents was enough for a full meal with meat, bread, coffee, and dessert. Adjusted for inflation, this would be roughly equivalent to $7, a value that barely covers a meal today. A group of men rests in front of the Bob Saloon in the small town of Mayosity, Montana, around 1880. Saloons like this were the heart of Wild West towns where cowboys and merchants gathered to drink and chat. They were also common for exhausted travelers who sometimes slept at the tables after long journeys. Many saloons, like Bob's, kept their doors open 24 hours, serving the weary and those seeking entertainment. The First and Last Chance, a small refreshment stand in Arizona, was a mandatory stop for travelers and merchants crossing the arid territory. Offering water, food, and rest, the place lived up to its name, often being the only chance for supplies before long stretches of inhospitable land. However, caution was necessary, as bandits frequently used these isolated spots to ambush caravans and unsuspecting travelers. Gayville, located in Deadwood Gulch, Dakota, was a small settlement formed during the gold rush. The wooden cabins and tents housed miners and merchants seeking fortune. The area attracted notable figures like Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane, who frequented Deadwood, the nearby town. Additionally, the residents had conflicts with indigenous tribes who fought to protect their sacred lands. Inside the Yellow Astor Saloon in Randsburg, California, around 1900. Saloons like this were more than just bars. They were places where all the men went to have fun and chat. The Yellow Astor, located in a mining town, was famous for high-stakes gambling, with gold nuggets used as currency. These meetings often defined alliances and business deals between attendees, making the atmosphere even more vibrant. In the early 1900s, Main Street in Manhattan, Nevada was bustling with lively stores and saloons. However, the city faced a constant problem: fires. With wooden buildings and narrow streets, fire spread quickly, destroying large areas of the town. Despite the challenges, Manhattan persisted, with its residents adopting more fire-resistant materials to protect against flames. Men gather in front of the Circle City Saloon in Alaska, while a steamship is docked in the background. The saloon offered rest for those arriving in the town, which became busy due to the nearby gold discovery. In Alaska, the construction of saloons in mining towns was usually a priority, as these places were essential for maintaining order and promoting social interaction in these isolated communities. In this photo from 1895, we see the office of a newspaper in Delamar, Nevada. The small newsroom used manual methods to produce copies, with simple presses and a lot of manual labor. Producing a full edition of the newspaper could take hours or even an entire day, depending on the print run and the number of pages, as each letter had to be individually placed in the press. Clancy's Saloon in Skagway, Alaska, was one of the busiest places in town, surrounded by simple buildings and muddy terrain. Soapy Smith, an outlaw who controlled much of the gambling, also manipulated the saloon. Smith and his gang were known for cheating newcomers and rigging games until he was killed in a gunfight in 1898, one of the many confrontations that marked Skagway's tumultuous history. In this photo from 1897, we see the Tollgate Saloon in Black Hawk, Colorado. With a detailed wooden bar and walls decorated with animal heads, the saloon stood out for its sophistication by Western standards. It also maintained strict rules, such as banning weapons on the premises, to prevent fights and maintain order among the customers. Here we see a Wyoming barber shop around 1905. With antique leather chairs and large mirrors, these barber shops were always frequented by men, despite the poor hygiene habits of the time. In addition to haircuts and beard trims, they served as meeting spots where men discussed the latest news or struck small business deals. Many barbers were also dentists or surgeons, offering services like tooth extractions. Freund's Gun Store, located in Laramie, Wyoming Territory, was a key spot for locals and travelers in need of firearms and ammunition. Specializing in pistols and rifles, the store served a region marked by violence and frequent disputes. Laramie was one of the first places to receive a railroad line, significantly increasing the traffic of people and the demand for firearms. Men posed for a photo at the White House Saloon in Cripple Creek, Colorado in 1893. Saloons like this were known for offering more than just drinks. They were venues for gambling, musical performances, and even political meetings. Some had entrances reserved for women, ensuring more privacy. In addition to entertainment, these places were where business was conducted, campaigns were discussed, and important decisions were made. Miles City's street in Montana in 1880 is filled with ox-drawn wagons carrying goods and cattle. The city, located in a strategic area, was a stopping point for merchants and cattlemen. At the time, Miles City became an important location for cattle trade, being one of the main destinations for the annual cattle drive, the movement of cattle from ranches to selling markets like Cheyenne.